and welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you are new. So I recently realized that C-Section Awareness Month is almost over and I never uploaded a video of my birth story. I did my birth vlog, so if you haven't checked that out, I'll make sure to link that, but I didn't actually talk through my birth story. And I also wanted to share a few tips for anyone else who's preparing for a delivery, which you never know, it could end up in a cesarean, or for anyone who is planning their first cesarean. As I said, I did have a birth vlog, so I don't have a ton to talk about when it comes to my birth story. But for those of you who are new, my first cesarean was unplanned, so this time around, I did have the option of a VBAC, and I'm still very happy with my choice. My cesarean was scheduled for November 16th at 7:30 in the morning. My hospital had me arrive at 5:30 in the morning. It was definitely odd walking into the hospital, knowing that I was going to be prepped to have this cesarean, basically have this baby scheduled. But between things just being harder due to the pandemic and having a 2-year-old at the time, it really made things a lot easier for my family. I had a specific date and time that I knew I would need care for my daughter and that I knew that all of this would be happening, and I was able to just really prepare for it. When I arrived to the hospital, I got settled with a few of the things they gave me. I got an IV. They asked me a ton of questions. I will say the IVs were rough. It took a while for them to really get them in correctly. I was very bruised by the end of that experience, but unfortunately that is something that I am just used to at this point. Needles in my veins have never gotten along very well. My husband and I did bring our own masks, but the hospital did also have masks that they were able to give. Evan, my husband, actually did have to use a hospital provided mask once we were getting ready to go into the operating room. Obviously, this is going to be a lot easier to do without holding Emmy. Hopefully she can entertain herself right next to me and I can get through this. I had a few preferences that I had outlined on a paper when I was preparing for this cesarean. I did a whole video on that, so I'll make sure to link that as well. But that came in handy when speaking with the nurse about things such as delayed cord clamping and breastfeeding. The first time around going into the operating room was such a whirlwind and such a blur that it was really kind of interesting to be fully aware of everything that was happening around me going into the operating room this time. Once I was there, they numbed me before they gave me the spinal. All right, that didn't last very long. The needle for the numbing was slightly painful, I will admit that. But once I got the spinal, I quickly lost a lot of feeling. My legs were so numb and so heavy, it was unbelievable. They said it was going to act fast, and they weren't kidding. Now, I did request a clear drape because I wanted to see when she arrived. So they had a clear drape, and then over that was another drape that I couldn't see. That way, when they were doing the initial work before they were pulling her out, I didn't have to see all of that. And then once it was time to pull her out, that was when they were going to drop the other drape and I was supposed to be able to see through the clear drape. I'm very happy that my husband was recording because what happened was they pulled down the one drape, which was blue. I could not see through it at all. And I was supposed to then be able to see through the clear drape, but the blue drape literally fell on my face. So I couldn't see anything. Like, they quickly fixed it and pulled it off of my face, but I had missed them initially bringing her out. But luckily my husband had recorded it and I did see her once she was there. I just hadn't seen the full process live. I did not feel any pain when they were cutting anything or pulling her. I literally just felt pressure. If you've ever gotten your wisdom teeth out, that's what it reminded me of. I was awake, but I was numb for that. And I just remember feeling the pressure of them removing my teeth without actually feeling the pain. And that was what this was, except obviously not my teeth. Once they got her cleaned up, I was able to do immediate skin to skin, which was very important to me, and I had made that clear. Never feel uncomfortable making it clear what you want. I mean, this is your delivery experience, and anything that you want, just tell them. I held Emmy on my chest for the entire time that they sewed me up and everything, and that is actually the only part that I was nervous about, because my first time around, my epidural had worn off by the time they were sewing me up. I remember feeling extremely sick, and then I was in extreme pain. I knew that this was definitely not going to be the same experience, but I still did have that nervousness about that. And I wasn't sure if maybe I would feel sick again. Luckily this time I did not, and I was able to just enjoy the whole experience. When that was over, we went back to the space that I had originally been in before we moved to the operating room. They completely lifted me up so that they could move me. There was no way I was going to be able to move. But once I returned to the area that we were in before, I was able to breastfeed her. And once I was done breastfeeding, they took her and did weight and measurements again and all of those things. I am not a nurse, so I have no idea what things are hospital specific and what things are standard procedure. But I do know that while I was in that area before moving up to my room, the medications that they were giving me were way stronger than what I was receiving once I went to my room. So I'm very happy with how they spaced things out and kind of made sure that I got the last of that medication right before I moved upstairs. So I still had that time that it was in my system. Because once I started feeling my legs again, I started feeling everything. And honestly, I think the most painful thing is when they're pushing down on your stomach to check your uterus. I do not wish that kind of pain on anyone, but I understand that it must be done. I had Emmy in the morning. As I said, my C-section was scheduled for 7:30 in the morning. For lunch, I was only allowed to have liquids, but by dinner, I was allowed to have solid food. I still made sure to take it easy with what I ate. I wanted to make sure that I avoided anything that could cause any sort of gas because that would be incredibly painful. That night in my recovery, I just worked on being able to stand up, and that was such a huge deal. That is not something that I worked to do the first time around, and my recovery this time around was a lot better. As much as it hurts when they say that getting moving as soon as you can will help, it's really true. And I really recommend listening to that advice. My recovery this time around was so much faster and so much easier. And I really attribute that to getting up and moving as soon as I could. Now, obviously I'm talking about how even standing was hard. So I was not going to Emmy when she was crying and changing her diaper or picking her up and walking back to bed. None of that stuff was happening. I was very much dependent on my husband for all of that. He did all of the diaper changes, and in the middle of the night when she needed to be brought to me, he took over on that as well. Since I had worked on standing that night before, the next day I really worked on walking. I didn't push myself too much. I just worked on walking around the room, and I was even able to shower on my own, which was such a big deal. The first time around, I was not able to shower on my own. It wasn't even a thought. I needed so much help. But this time around, without pushing myself too much, I just made sure I was working toward that independence. I definitely got a little too confident that second night though. I remember the nurse coming in and asking me if I had wanted the next dose of medication. In my mind, I was like, oh, I have a choice. Maybe I don't need this. And that was not the case at all. I was in so much pain after having turned that down. If I could go back, I would not have turned that down for sure. The next morning, once I got back on track with my medications and I wasn't in as much pain, I was able to walk around again. Because of COVID, Evan was confined to the room. He was not allowed to leave the room, even with a mask on, but I was allowed to leave the room. I was allowed to leave the room with my mask on and walk around the floor. So that's exactly what I did. I just did lap after lap after lap and just got myself moving. Again, that day I was able to shower, and we were really hoping to leave by 11 a.m. because that was the earliest I was able to get discharged. Waiting on all the paperwork and everything for me to be discharged, we ended up not leaving until later in the day. But we were still able to leave on Wednesday. I was expecting to have 3 nights there because generally that's what happens with a cesarean, but because of COVID, they were really helpful with getting people out sooner. My parents had Alani, and if you have a little one as well, I know that you probably miss them just like I did when we were in the hospital, but one of the things that helped a lot was my parents still kept her when we came back from the hospital. Of course, we were really excited for Alani to meet Emmy, and we missed her a lot, but having that first night on our own to kind of figure things out, especially with me still being in pain, it was really helpful to not throw a toddler into the mix. And speaking of going home, I was prescribed pain medication, and those were ready in time for us to pick them up on the way home, which was really helpful because by the time I got home, I basically was ready for my next dose. I know that some people set themselves up so that they're downstairs if they do have a home that is more than 1 floor. I did find being able to go up the stairs and sleep in my same bed. The thing that I found most difficult was actually getting up from my bed or even just laying down. Just that motion was quite painful. So similar to the hospital, I would have Evan bring Emmy to me. And I definitely did not try to get up or really even sit down while holding her, because it did require so much extra effort for me to sit or to lay down or any of that stuff. It was a lot easier for me to get myself situated and then Evan to be able to give her to me for me to feed her or anything like that. I feel like that's it for my birth story. Because I vlogged, I don't think there's a ton of extra things that I have to say in regards to what happened with her birth. But I do have some things that I think helped me with my recovery. Obviously, it is personal choice. Everyone is different. There are things that worked for me that wouldn't have worked for other people, but these are the things that I thought were really helpful. I had mentioned these underwear in my hospital bag video, so I absolutely loved them. They are very high-waisted. They went over my cesarean. I ended up preferring these or the mesh underwear that I got from the hospital with a maxi pad. That is just what worked best for me. I got the maxi overnight pads so that they were really big, and this was just my personal preference. I bought the Always disposable panties, but I honestly didn't even like these more than the mesh underwear from the hospital. I still have a whole pack of them because I didn't really like using them. Also, I know people swear by the Frida Baby Peri bottle, but I honestly prefer the hospital one. I know that this has a great angle and it's supposed to work better, but I just found that it was messier. So I preferred to use the hospital one. People swear by this one though. So if you loved it or you already have purchased this, go for it. Something that I loved having was my abdominal binder. It felt really good for me to have that pressure. So I wouldn't put this up here on my stomach. I would wear it pretty low so that it was putting that pressure where I needed it. I've got to be honest, after cesarean, it can definitely feel like things are just not all held together. So this definitely helped. Between the things that I talked about that helped me within my birth story and these items that I mentioned, I can't really think of anything else that I think is worth noting when it comes to a cesarean recovery. But if you have any questions or if you have any tips, please make sure to leave them in the comments. It is always helpful for other people to share what worked best for them, because again, just because it worked well for me doesn't mean it's going to work well for somebody else. With that said though, I hope that this video was helpful for you. If you are expecting, congratulations, and I really wish the best for you. Many blessings to you and your family. Also, even if you're not planning on having a cesarean, I was not planning on having a cesarean my first time around. I still do think it is important to be informed about what happens with a cesarean and how best to recover from one. My next steps are honestly to start physical therapy. It is something that I think is important and will really help me. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have not yet subscribed, please do. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.